Welcome, everyone, to the Cardano Effect Podcast, Episode 1. The purpose of this podcast is to take information in Cardano and break it down into a more consumable manner. So we're taking that high developer information and breaking it down into chunks so everyone can feel extremely involved within the community. I want to thank everyone for commenting, and subscribing. It seems like we already have an audience, and I'm very excited. Thank you so much. Thanks for all of your support. So who is this podcast for? This podcast is for everyone. So if you just found this podcast by random, or you're on YouTube, you're surfing, and you've never heard of cryptocurrency before, this podcast is for you. If you purchased or invested in Bitcoin, or you've heard of Bitcoin and you just want to learn more, this podcast is for you. If you already have graduated to that Bitcoin stage and you're looking for an altcoin or different cryptocurrencies, this podcast is for you. If you've heard the term third generation blockchain and you want to learn more about it, this podcast is for you. If you are an investor, if you are an early investor, a late investor, you bought at the top, you bought at the bottom, you bought wherever, you could be an ICO investor, this podcast is for you. If you're a dreamer like me and you see yourself long-term within this ecosystem, this podcast is for you. And last but not least, if you have qualms with the project and you don't like Cardano for some reason, this podcast is for you. We are going to be including an email address down below in the description. It's called the cardanoeffect@gmail.com. So if you have questions, comments, or concerns, you can shoot a question over to that email address. We're going to amalgamate those, and we are going to do a Q&A session every couple of weeks, and we're going to try to get to as many community questions as possible. Try to sum everything up, and we're going to give the best possible answers that we can give. We may not reach to every single question, but we're going to try to get to every single one. And of course, you can always comment below. So before I pass the baton over to Rick, I want to preface this by saying that this is not financial advice, and none of what we speak of should be taken as financial advice. You are your best financial advisor, and if you don't think you are, you need to find someone that's qualified to do so, because it's not us. We are just a group of people who are very passionate about cryptocurrency, and in particular, very passionate about Cardano. So that being said, you take this and you listen and you try to absorb the information, but don't take it as financial advice. You need to do your own research. You need to do your own diligence. So with that, I'm going to pass the baton over to Rick. He's going to introduce himself. He's the other host of the Cardano Effect, and he's also going to introduce our special guest. Rick?
Thank you, Philippe. I appreciate the introductions there, and also giving people a good rundown of what we're doing here at the Cardano Effect. Welcome, everyone. Glad to have you here. We're very excited to get this show on the road. This is our Genesis block of the Cardano program. This is getting our podcast up and off the ground. We hope this provides a really good communication medium for the community to get information out on Cardano and also receive feedback from the community. And Philippe did a great job describing that. So I'm just going to continue on with what we have here. So we have Philippe as a host. I'm going to be a host. And we also have our special guest tonight, Sebastian, who's also going to be a future guest host when we have highly technical things that are highly technical in nature. And we want to boil them down to, how can the average crypto investor understand how does this information apply to me and how does it make the Cardano ecosystem work? Okay, so that's just a little bit of description of what this podcast is about. And tonight's episode is based on the three primary people that will be working these podcasts. And in the future, we'll have other guests on based off of your requests, like I put out in the promo video. As we start getting feedback, and we did get a few pointers come back where people would like to get involved. So we'll get more information from the community in the future. So next, I'm going to pass over to Mr. Sebastian Guillemot. He's one of the Emergo employees who's been involved with the system for a very long time, and people know him quite well. So Sebastian, over to you, sir.
Hey, everyone. Maybe you've already seen me in my YouTube videos. I think we all do YouTube videos in this podcast, but my videos are usually focused on the actual technology, in the sense that I tend to go over the papers, over the code, the specifications, this kind of stuff, and try and explain it. The videos I make tend to be for a technical audience, That is to say, if you're not really familiar with technology and you want to understand the concept of Cardano, my videos may be useful, but you're not really the target audience. I try and make my videos for the developers in the ecosystem, right? So somebody who's curious about how the research is applied in more details and wants to build something either off of Cardano or similar to Cardano, they'd be able to go through my video, understand what's happening, possibly do some derivative research or works. And so that's kind of the purpose of the content I create. And that's essentially why it has kind of business value for Emergo, right? And so at Emergo, I do R&D in general. So I do some programming and this kind of stuff, but also I spend a fair amount of my time doing these explainer videos and explainer blogs and this kind of stuff.
Thank you, Sebastian. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to go on to one of our first subject areas in this video, in the Genesis block that I've been calling it. And so there's 4 subject areas and then a bonus discussion at the end, or 3 subject areas and a bonus discussion at the end. And the first area we're going to talk about is how did you get into crypto personally, each person here. Then the next one is how did you first learn of Cardano? Third will be why are you dedicating your efforts to Cardano, vice any other crypto? And the idea behind that question is, what makes Cardano worth investing your time and money promoting it and being involved? And fourth, if we get there, what does mass adoption mean? And we're not talking about one Lambo. We're talking about, how would the average person get to the point of using crypto? Okay, so if you guys are okay with it, who wants to lead off? You want me to roll with it, or how did you get into crypto?
I can start off. So I have to recollect all of my thoughts, but crypto started, I was aware of crypto back in, like everyone, you start with Bitcoin and you progress forward. But I first heard of Bitcoin in 2011, 2012, but I did not invest, unfortunately. I was in college. My brother and I were reading around and we found it online and, the whole dark web thing. And we just got associated within that, not to do any illegalities, just as business purposes, mining and whatnot. But that's where I first heard of Bitcoin, did not invest, did not mine. And I followed it for the years that led afterwards. And I really did not become an investor until May of 2017. So last year, so like a year and a half ago. And, I followed the Mt. Gox thing and I was like, oh, wow, this is an issue. But then the whole Ethereum run and the hype started building again. And I looked into it a little bit deeper and I was like, I need to get more involved in this space. I need to see what's going on. So that's when I first got into crypto. That's when I first learned of crypto. And from then, I've been literally eating, breathing, and sleeping crypto for the past year and a half. I look at it all day and I'm always on news articles and reading and researching. And one thing led to another. I jumped from Bitcoin. I found other altcoins that I found interest in, and and then it led me to here. And now I'm on this podcast with you. But that's my story about how I got into crypto, how I learned of crypto, and yes.
All right, so I guess I'll pick it up from here. So how did I get into crypto? Well, it started basically in about 2013, but it actually preceded that. But really getting into crypto started about 2013. I have 2 sons who first started getting involved prior to 2013 with different digital currencies, and I heard the name Bitcoin. So basically, I had heard of Bitcoin prior to 2013. And then in 2013, my son started mining little bits of cryptocurrencies using GPU miners like Darkcoin, Litecoin, Feathercoin. Then he got me looking at it, because being dad of 4, of 4 kids, I had a busy life, and they're like, hey, Dad, check this out. And I'm always into tech. I mean, I kind of work into tech during the day and crypto at night kind of thing. But so I thought it was really interesting. I said, hey, this is a really cool idea. And I started mining Netcoin, which like completely crashed. It's completely obliterated. But that's how I first got into crypto. But my real first crypto, well, what really got my attention is my son was mining things like the dark coin and feather coin. And so I got some visual aids. I got some props here. I got to mask the private key. So like this feather coin, and he would sell them on eBay. So he mined it at basically the cost of nothing, and then he would sell it on eBay at a little bit more of the value, because people could see a tangible object, right? They could say, "Oh, look, that's something I can purchase for like $5 for a paper certificate that was only worth maybe $2 or $3 or something like that." And then he would mail it to him, because back then eBay allowed it. And I was like, wow, people actually like this stuff. It's not just a gimmicky hobby. If you can transaction this stuff on eBay, then there's some value to it. And so then real big on 2013, I bought my very first Bitcoin. There it is. It's a Cassatius coin. And that's when it really clicked. And I was like, wow, these guys are onto something, because it's digital. It lives inside the computer. You can extract it and stick it into a physical object that other humans can hold in their hand. Because, and I was like amazed. So fortunately, that's my only Bitcoin. I wanted to invest a lot more into it, but that's really when the crypto bug got into me, was at that point. But what predated crypto was, in the late 1990s, when I had silver coins, I would collect little silver coins, and I go, wow, this is a silver dime, and its face value says 10 cents, but its value in weight was like $2.90, $3.20, and it kept going up. And then gold came about, and I thought, oh, I need to get into that gold. But I never really had any money, because I'm a working guy, so whatever money I have is what comes from my paycheck. And I was like, oh man, I should invest in gold, or I should take out a loan and buy gold, because I watched the price go from like $250 to $300 in gold, and I started realizing, well, this is going somewhere. So, but I missed that boat. And then along came Bitcoin, and it went from like 250 when I bought it to 1,000. I'm like, oh my gosh, it quadrupled in value. I wish I would have bought more. And I thought I missed that boat. It was only $1,000, right? And then after that, with Bitcoin, the next one was Ethereum. And I remember Julian Assange tweeting about Ethereum when it was only like about $60 roughly. And he put he said, hey, which cryptocurrency should WikiLeaks divest into? And he listed, he said Ethereum, Monero, and a couple others he put on that list. And Ethereum hit the top, and by the time the tweet ran its course over a couple of days, Ethereum was like $62-$65. Like, oh, I need to get into that one. And a year later, I was like, I missed that boat. So I was like, that was basically my history on crypto. So I was the average guy kind of buyer, just getting my feet wet, making all kinds of novice mistakes. I mean, there's a lot of painful mistakes to be learning crypto. But anyway, that's basically how did I get into crypto in kind of a long and convoluted way. All right. So Sebastian, what do you have to say about this? How'd you get into crypto?
Yeah, so I came in about 2013. Right. So I had seen on Reddit and whatever, like price of Bitcoin hits 1,000 or whatever. And I was like, I've heard this a few times before. Like, why is it hitting in the news all of a sudden? I should kind of check it out. And kind of read up into it. And it's like, oh, this is kind of an interesting concept. I studied math and this kind of stuff. And at that time I was, just starting university, but, I was, studying math and this kind of stuff. It's like, yeah, it's a pretty cool idea. Like, if you try to build a currency on kind of a mathematical basis of some kind, right? And so I was looking into it, and my little brother's friends, like a few of them owned some Bitcoins, and like, oh my God, we just made a huge amount of money and whatever. And they're kind of talking about it, like, oh yeah, this is so cool and whatever. And I mean, I don't have enough money to buy anything. I didn't really even have any money at all. Like, I just entered university or whatever. So I didn't buy any or whatever, but some of my little brother's friends were like, oh, we can, send you a small amount over for you to kind of play around with, get a feel for what it's like, what the content of it is, how to install a wallet and what it means to transact with Bitcoin or whatever. So, we got a small amount from them. And then, we spent it on a few stuff. Like I bought, a Humble Bundle, which is like a bundle of video games. It's fairly cheap purchase. and they accepted Bitcoin at the time. And I'm not sure if they still do. And, I tried out, it's pretty painful. You're writing this UI, this wallet with like a really terrible UI. It takes like 3 days to sync the client at that point. I forget how much it was, but it's like a few days to sync the client until you can finally receive your coin. And then you like send it over to purchase the Humble bundle. And it's like, please wait. And you're just like waiting. You're waiting, you're looking at your watch, like what happened? Did it just disappear into thin air? Like what happened? But no, it just turns out Bitcoin has like a really long confirmation time. And I was like, I was impressed by the concept, but then I realized like, yeah, it's not that great. Like there's a huge amount of flaws, and this is like really hard to get into and whatever. So I was like, clearly somebody must have improved on this. For any research problem, like ever, first version comes out and people try and improve on it and whatever. So I started looking into like kind of what are the alternatives around. So I checked out a few other like altcoins at the time, and there's some pretty cool concepts at that time also, but nothing really interested me. So I kind of just dropped out of the space at that point. That's kind of my introduction to crypto.
Well, that's interesting. So all three of us came from three different directions and end up landing at roughly the same point. All right. Thanks for that, Sebastian. Philippe, we are on the next area is how did you first learn of Cardano? Now, I led off with on the first round with how did you get into crypto? Oh, no, wait. Philippe led off with how did you get into crypto? So, Philippe, you want to lead us off with how did you first learn of Cardano?
Okay, well, I first learned of Cardano through Charles's whiteboard video, as did many people. It was a great whiteboard video released at the end of 2017, I believe November-ish. It might have been late October-ish, but that whiteboard video really introduced me into Cardano. But I want to give a little backdrop of my journey looking for this out. Like it just made sense. And, I was getting into crypto a lot more during the summer of 2017. I was investing, moving things around, looking at different alt projects. Like Sebastian was saying, a lot of them didn't catch my eye. I actually go and look through the white paper. Although I don't understand everything all the time, I still look to see if there's a business model behind it. And then I saw Charles's video, and Charles, he's very eloquent, and what he was saying resonated with me completely, and it really got the gears turning in my head. And I introduced myself earlier as a dreamer, as a person that literally wants to exist within a system. And I think that Charles provided that through that whiteboard video, because one of the things that he stretched on was this idea of interoperability. And this was a very powerful term to me. I saw that there could be a connection between, the bridge between the regular fiat world and the crypto world is sometimes very unclear. And that term really allows me as an investor to understand that, it's not one system dies, the other prospers, but two systems can live simultaneously. And, that's just what really led me to this project. I bring some props as well. And I have a story about this whole idea of like people within the system and moving on to crypto. And basically, I was at the bank the other day, and this lady next to me was saying something around the lines like, oh, she went up to the teller, and it was probably 9 a.m., 10 a.m. in the morning, and the line is full. And of course, you're waiting in line to get your money out of the bank, which doesn't make much sense. But the lady in front of me goes up to the teller and asks the teller, can I withdraw $1,000? I'm going on vacation next week. And it was the weirdest question I've ever heard, because like it's the person's account with the person's money and they're asking like permission. I know it was meant as more of a lighthearted joke, but like the Matrix thing in my head just like clicked. Like there needs to be just this system can't be the only one that exists. And then couple that with all the information that came out with the whiteboard videos and checking out the website and just seeing the level of professionalism and the level of business that IOHK does. I mean, not only was this like a dreamer cryptocurrency project, but IOHK is an actual legitimate business. So many crypto projects out there are not businesses. They do not run a business. And if you do not run a business on top of your project will fail because the balance sheets are going to fall out of whack. As soon as your ICO money runs out, that's it. But IOHK is a cryptocurrency starter. They're successful, and that coupled with Charles, coupled with the direction I saw the project going, that's really my introduction into Cardano.
All right. Thanks, Philippe. I'll roll with with this one here. How did I first learn of Cardano? Well, this is an interesting story. I was in my kitchen, and it was about this time last year, early November, maybe late October, roughly about this time frame. And I had just started leaning towards investing more into cryptocurrencies. And my sons were talking about ADA. Now, they were talking about all different kind of things. EOS was starting to come online. And there was a couple other ICOs that were big in name. I had not heard of the Cardano ICO, but it was about this time last year. And so I have two sons, and my one son was talking about it pretty passionately about the information. He said, Dad, you got to check out this video. And he pulled up the Charles Hoskinson whiteboard video that Philippe had just mentioned. And I watched this. Now, the interesting thing is in my line of work, there are scientists who do this kind of work. I don't understand the math like Sebastian, like Sebastian came, he understands the math. I don't get the math. I look at the final output product of these really brilliant scientists, and they'll explain to me how things work and how they develop the math. And as long as I can see the output product and understand it and use it as a tool to do my job, I'm good. It almost doesn't even matter what was that math in the background. And when I saw Charles explaining this, it really got my attention. And I said, I'm going to go find this stuff. And fortunately, my sons had already done the research on it, and I knew where to go find it. And I started getting involved with Cardano, started investing in it. And maybe a week later, a video from Dr. Duncan Coutts came out. And I was like, wow, okay. I mean, these videos were starting to knock my socks off. And I thought, I'm not seeing this level of science and research being applied. There were the three big major factors that Charles described what a cryptocurrency has to do. But once I started seeing all the research going into it, and I realized this is the thing for me, or at least this definitely has a future. So not really the business side. I wasn't even thinking of the business side. It hadn't even crossed my mind, as Philippe had mentioned, from the business angle that IOHK has, which is awesome, and Emergo has, which is great. What was crossing in my mind was the science behind it, and the fact they were doing all this research, and that there were white papers that could be read. Although there were many other white papers out on cryptos, that particular white paper caught my attention. So that's really how I first learned of Cardano. And as more videos came out from IOHK, it kept grabbing more and more of my attention. I said, wow, these guys are really guys and gals. Meredith did one on security. And I realized, wow, they are very proactive in getting these videos out. They know how to communicate. And I think between the science, they're able to communicate science to me, the average guy, and they were able to communicate via these excellent YouTube videos. I mean, I just have to say they're great. That's all there's to it. And that's what hooked me. And that's when I said, you know what? I'm going to dive way deep into this line because I caught it early enough to where I can still, I can make money off it because that's all why we do this, but I can also learn from it and maybe somehow be a pioneer in this field, something that, I've never been able to do before. I hadn't caught it early enough, but this is one that I caught early enough where I could get heavily involved. And that's where we're at now. So that's my story. That's my, how did I first learn of Cardano? Sebastian, you're on deck, sir.
Yeah, so I kind of got back into the space as the hype kind of started building up around it. And I was like, well, I wonder what's changed, right? If the price is suddenly skyrocketing or whatever, like hopefully something's changed in the technology, and there's a reason for this hype. And I started looking into it, and sure enough, found Ethereum, and I thought it was a really cool idea, the concept of dApps and whatever. And so I started kind of doing a really deep dive into Ethereum, learning smart contracts, reading through the yellow paper, and all this kind of stuff. And obviously every project has its engineering flaws and whatever, so it's not a perfect project. But I was getting pretty involved in it, not in the community side, but just on the technology side. And at the same time, I was, keeping my eye out open for other projects. What else is going on in the space? How else has it evolved since I kind of came in last time? And that's when I found Cardano. And so I was reading Cardano, and the first line description was something like, cryptocurrency based off of Haskell. And I was like, oh my God, I got to read more into this. Because at the time, I was kind of like an amateur Haskler, which, kind of came naturally from doing studying both computer science and math. And so I was like, oh man, somebody's building a cryptocurrency based stuff. I got to check this out. And I was looking into it more. And I think what really hooked me was the fact that Cardano was a project with mathematical rigor. And this is like a concept that is, really drilled into you if you take a math major in university. The fact that whenever you make a statement, you have to have a rigorous proof for it. And the ability to write a proof that is rigorous and, understand the importance of a rigorous proof is basically what a math major is trying to teach you. And so, in fact, like one kind of story that stuck with me when I was going through, math courses in university was, I had like a third year course in math at some point, and we had a midterm. You get a midterm, you have an hour and a half to solve it. It's like 5 questions or whatever, and they're fairly long and complicated questions. And I was going through one of them, and I had the question right, except near the end, I like messed up. And I ended up getting a 0 on that question. I went to the professor, like after he handed back the, graded midterms, I was like, come on, a 0? Like I got the entire proof correct, except like the last part, I made some mistake and whatever. And his answer is, what, for mathematical, proof, there's, 2 results. Either it's true or it's not. In your case, it's not. And, if it's not true, it gets a 0. And, I still think that's kind of too strict for, educational purposes. But I mean, in the real world, that is true, right? If you have a proof and it's false, it's not worth anything, right? You made a mistake, and that's kind of the importance of mathematical rigor, right? You have to have a formal proof that your statement really is correct. And I thought not only the people working on Cardano respect this, they made it like a fundamental pillar of their project. And, there's other cryptocurrencies that do dabble in research and do dabble in implementation of research papers, but none of them really had it as a fundamental pillar such as Cardano. And that kind of got me really interested in the project. And kind of as I was going through it and the documentation and the code and everything I was reading through, I realized this is a very technical project. And if you don't have kind of a background on this topic, there's no way you could understand what's going on. And I thought, this is maybe a unique role for me to play in kind of an educational side, because I've always liked teaching people and this kind of stuff. And so, I even in high school, I used to teach younger kids. In university, I ran a mentor course for free for other students. And I always liked this kind of teaching stuff. So I thought, I can, leverage my knowledge to help people understand this. And so I started a YouTube channel to kind of, upload some videos of me talking about the project. And that's kind of how I got started.
So the next question in the lineup for today is, why are you dedicating your efforts to Cardano vice any other crypto? And this is in the context of, okay, we're putting, between the 3 of us here, we all have previous YouTube channels that we have created for Cardano related matters and other crypto related matters. And so this question is really asking, why did we pursue our efforts down the line of Cardano? And who would like to lead off? Are we going to continue the round robin with you, Philippe?
Sure. Let's go ahead. So why Cardano versus any other project out there? I mean, I know there's a small list of 3rd generation blockchains. Why do I get attached to this one? Why did I pretty much dedicate my YouTube channel to Cardano? And the same can go for Rick and Sebastian. That's a good question. To tell you the truth, a little bit of what everyone was saying. the scientific and mathematical rigor of this project is incredible. And I know people make fun of this all the time on Twitter and on Reddit and on YouTube about this whole idea of peer reviewed, but it's a serious deal. If you've been to university, you've been to college, and you've written a paper and you've had it peer reviewed, or you've submitted a thesis, and it doesn't even have to be for math, it can be for any subject, you realize how difficult it is. Because it's one thing to know information more than the next person. So if there's a cryptographer, he could tell me what cryptography is, and I'd have to believe him solely on the fact that he's a cryptographer and he knows more about that subject than me. But to submit a paper to an academic conference, the top conferences in the world, and every idea that you have, you write it into a paper and you get it peer reviewed, that's a whole nother ball game. I mean, they're getting their papers reviewed by other people that are pretty much geniuses in the field, regarded as geniuses in the field. They've innovated, they've created new things, they've invented things, and all their life revolves around figuring out what the best math and the best science is for that particular topic. And I just don't see any other projects going forward. So if you're telling me that you're a third generation blockchain and you're implementing this protocol, you're doing proof of stake, or you're putting something in your project, I just have to believe you solely because you told me that. I can't verify it. But if someone else is verifying it who's an expert on that field, that just boosts up the credibility. So I think that's one of the most underrated features of Cardano. And it's a reason why I gravitated towards this project, because there are checks and balances in place to protect the entire project's integrity. I'm not a coder. My brother's a coder. And it's like he codes and there could be a sloppy line of code in his code. And I'm not sure. I can't tell him it's a sloppy line of code until someone else finds that sloppy line of code. And I feel like Cardano puts processes in place to prevent these kind of things from happening, or to limit the amount of glitches that are going to be going on within the system. And at the end of the day, we're playing with people's money here. I mean, people are investing a large amount of their net worth into this project. Whether it's good financial advice or not, we all know that people are putting more than they're willing to lose into projects. And we know that people are going to want to, if it accomplishes what it's supposed to accomplish, people are going to want to live with inside the ecosystem, which means that a large portion of people's net worth is going to be in this system. So do you want to be in a system that wasn't peer reviewed, or wasn't audited 1,000 times, or wasn't looked at by the experts in the field? Or do you just want to say, oh, this person said so, so it is? And I truly believe that Cardano, when I looked at Cardano, it's really one of a kind in the field. I mean, all these other crypto projects, they focus on different use cases, but within the space of smart contracts, within this particular third generation blockchain, and comparing with Ethereum, which is second generation, it stands leagues apart because of the rigor that is attached to this project. And I think that this is why I gravitated to this project, and this is why I'll continue to follow this project. And I really see myself within this ecosystem.
All right. Thank you, Philippe. I'll go with the next one. So why did I dedicate my efforts to the Cardano project? Well, I'm kind of like the boiled frog. I didn't intend to. It just a sequence of events ended up landing me on putting more attention onto the Cardano project and the Cardano and ADA more so than others. So again, I go back to the time, kind of like revisit the time about a year ago today, and then work my way forward to now, the present. So about a year ago today, my only interest in Cardano was, ooh, neat science, very small price, big money on the way. And that was it. That's all I cared about. And that's what a lot of people, that's all they care about. And there was all these different cryptocurrencies laid out before me. It was right before the big bull run. And Ethereum, I think there were murmurs about Casper at the time, or if some sort of proof of stake, something that was going to improve Ethereum. There was talk about Lightning Network coming out for Bitcoin and stuff like that. And I had some electronic Bitcoin, I had some electronic Ethereum, Dash. was another one. And so, looking through CoinMarketCap, there were these top 10, and I would look down through the list and I go, wow, look at all these different cryptocurrencies. But over time, what happened is Cardano just kind of soaked in on me. Like I said, boiled frog. So by late December last year, there was this bull run kicking in, and then I heard of Emergo, and I thought, wow, there's other companies getting involved with this. I didn't know how the relationships worked at the time, but and I saw Emergo was based out of Shibuya, Japan, and I thought, oh wow, there's a lot of Japanese centric here, and I know how the Japanese are. I visit Japan a couple times a year sometimes, and I was like, yeah, this is good stuff. So it kind of drew me in even more. And then Traxia, and I found out about that, and I was like, wow, I could get involved with an ICO, and I could actually get in on the ground floor of an ICO. And I have a Traxia t-shirt I was going to wear tonight, but it's a little bit too bright blue in this dark lighting. It made me glow like a ghost. I was like, nah, I can't wear that. But maybe next podcast, who knows? So anyway, I learned of Emergo and then Traxia and the additional information about Cardano and where it was going and all the different versions of Ouroboros and the really cool names. I mean, the ancient Greek mythology names of Cardano really got my attention. I said, wow, that's cool. Like, I made a Reddit name a while back that was kind of Cardano related. And using ancient Greek mythology names. And I still had all these other coins like Nano. Nano had an awesome community. They still do. Nano has an awesome community. Doge has this awesome community, but Nano is really coming up online. I have no idea how their security works, right? Nano is a super fast coin. And I was like, oh, look, I could get involved with Nano and I can support them. Not the ledger Nano, but the cryptocurrency called Nano. And they have a very engaging and very lively community. And then I found the Cardano forum. Okay, at forum.cardano.org or however the URL is. And that was probably by maybe February or March, maybe earlier than that, of 2018 of this year. And the people on the Cardano forum were great. I mean, we had really lively and engaging conversations. We had controversial conversations. There were disagreements. There were people trying to help other people learn. And that's really what I liked. I was like, oh, wow, this guy's helping this guy learn. That fellow's having technical difficulties. And they had this technical forum where some guy, could not get into his wallet because he had an error, whatever that error was. And here's two other people chiming in and helping that guy out. And they got their wallet fixed. And I was like, man, this is great. And these are volunteers. So that kind of inspired me. Now, I know other communities have that too, and that's great. I just didn't know that. You know what I mean? So that's one of those things where I got lucky and I stumbled across it, or I ran across the link somewhere during the course of doing some research. And so that's what really drew me in was the characters and the personalities on the Cardano forum. Sebastian was there. I remember seeing him on there, and Philippe showed up sometime mid last year, maybe around maybe March, June, May. I don't want to put time on it. My memory is really bad with time. I'm getting old and it just doesn't tick like it used to. But it was the community on the Cardano forum. I was not a big user of Telegram. I first started using Telegram like 2 years ago or 3 years ago. Then there was that big Telegram hack, and my email address actually showed up on the dark web, which is a bad thing. And it was flagged by Asperian because I use Asperian as my financial monitoring defense mechanism or whatever you want to call it, and they said, hey, your email address showed up on the dark web, and I've traced it and I followed the breadcrumbs and found out, oh, it came from the Telegram hack or whatever happened. I mean, I can't say that for certain for fact. It's just the little pieces of data I put together. So I stopped using Telegram. But then, so after I got involved with the Telegram forum, while I was there, I found out that people were using Telegram to communicate. And I thought, I need to see how that works. And I mean, how's it working out for that community? So then I got in on Telegram and found this very lively conversation. So the nice thing about the Cardano forum is you had these threaded discussions that were organized by subjects and organized by, links, and you could make your own link. You could create your own subject. And that was great. And then I found out about Telegram, which all the cryptos have it. And I think it's awesome use of communication power. And I said, this is like the best thing since sliced bread. And the people in the Telegram were extremely helpful. And like I said, it was this lively, very engaging conversation in real time, 24 hours a day. And that just kind of blew my mind. And so I said, wow, this is cool. And at some point, I think it was about June, I started making my YouTube videos. I started with, this is how to, like my videos are, how do you do a procedure, which it really doesn't get a lot of likes because people go, oh, that's how you do procedure. Okay, great. You don't subscribe to that kind of stuff. You just look it up when you need it, or you ignore it when you don't need it. But I started making those kind of videos because that's all I know how to do. And like there's one on a Ledger, there's a thing on Traxia, there's a thing on Spade, which Spade plans on adopting Cardano that I'd done on the videos. And then I found, wow, people really like these Cardano videos. I don't know if it's the name, like you put it in the name in the title, or you put the name in the metadata down below on the YouTube channel, but it garnered more attention. So although I was already kind of leaning into Cardano as it is, that kind of drew me even more. And I was like, well, these are actually working. So let me kind of like build momentum with Cardano, and then I can branch out into other directions. So that's where I'm at now. So I'm going to go back to doing other videos that lead outside the Cardano ecosystem over on my other channel, Digital Fortress. But here with the Cardano effect, now that we're here, I mean, this is why I dedicated efforts to Cardano. Now that we're here at this point today with the Cardano effect podcast, we're going to branch out even more. So we're going to get a lot of energy focused on Cardano via this podcast. And through the brilliant ideas coming from Sebastian and Philippe, both of them, they have great ideas coming out. We're going to branch out into other areas and invite people to where we can build bridges with other communities via this podcast. Okay. So speaking of great ideas, that leads us to Sebastian on why are you dedicating efforts to Cardano, vice any other crypto? Over to you.
Yeah, so it's kind of like what I was mentioning before with the mathematical rigor and all this kind of stuff. What it really boils down to is the reason I stuck with it is just, curiosity, right? I mean, maybe but the iOSK team is huge, right? And the Emergo team is also growing, more so this year than before. But, there's a lot of people working on this project, right? And so at the time when I was, getting involved in Cardano, I was still working at Microsoft as an engineer. And so, that was taking up a huge amount of my time. But, I would come back home every day and kind of read up on it briefly. And during the weekends, I would just spend my weekend, sitting down and I'd go through all the commits for the GitHub repo and just read all the code and figure out what's happening really at the low level scale. And then I'd make a video about it going, okay, this is what happened this week. This is all the code that's changed. This is why the code's changed and what it means. Obviously, there's a huge limitation to what I could do from the outside because, if you're a software engineer, a lot of the code comes, undocumented based on some random internal discussion, right? So there's a limit to how much I could do. But just the fact that there was a seemingly never-ending stream of just content that I could consume to, improve my understanding of blockchain, Cardano project. Sometimes you read some, really good Haskell solution to a problem. You're like, that's interesting. And sometimes you find some really nice mathematical solutions to a problem. And you're like, well, that's really cool. And so this kind of stuff just kept coming out. And in fact, like even now that there's more people working for RHK, there's more papers and code coming out than, one person can keep up with. And so, I try my best to kind of triage the material, like, okay, this thing I think it's worth spending my time looking into, this thing maybe not. And there's more cool things that I'd like to look into than I have time to spend in a day. And, that's kind of sad. And so because of that, that's kind of one of the decisions that drove me to leave Microsoft to go work for Emergo, because Emergo is, seeing my videos and this kind of stuff. And they were at the time thinking of starting an R&D department, right? And so Nico, who's the current CTO of Emergo, reached out to me. He's like, hey, do you want to join Emergo? Help us build our, R&D department. I've seen some of your videos. It's really cool. And so I ended up joining that to be able to spend more time on Cardano to, increase the amount of stuff I can look into. And, it's been an amazing ride ever since at Emergo, where, I basically paid to, read these papers and read this code and build the project too, and write my own code. And this is really amazing for me. So this is why I've kind of stayed involved.
Yeah, that must be fantastic being able to, well, for one, going from Microsoft, it's like, oh, Microsoft is a dream job. But then you have this, maybe to some people might think that, but then you see this new frontier that you're interested in, and you're like, hey, you know what? I can get on that early. And is that kind of how it went?
Yeah, I mean, it is part of deciding what I want to do with my life, right? Because I mean, Microsoft's really great. I loved working at Microsoft. The work-life balance is really good. The stuff I was working on is pretty cool, I think. But at the time I was working on Bing, the search engine, which I think is a team you've been proud of working on, because Bing really has. I mean, one, Bing makes a lot of money, and so you can be proud to know you're working on a project that makes money. But beyond that, I mean, Bing really has made search results better, even not through just Bing itself, but the fact that Google has to compete with Bing. You can see internally when we launch a feature and we improve our search results on one thing, a few months later, like Google comes and competes. And so you can visually see based on our metrics that, we're making the world a better place. And so that's really good. But, I thought I could have a bigger impact with Cardano and with my time on this project. And, it's really exciting to be kind of, this exciting field of research and be able to contribute to it. And so that was too appealing for me to pass up on. And also, like, even when I was working at Microsoft, it was really consuming my life, the Cardano project, because, at Microsoft and my team, we had a system where every week one person on the team would present about new technology, just to make sure everybody on the team is aware of what's happening in the space. Because oftentimes when people have kids and whatever, they stop really looking into the technology and they kind of start falling behind. So to avoid that happening, Microsoft encouraged everybody to keep learning, right? And so every week we'd have a presentation. I did one about Ouroboros, and I explained all the papers and how it works and whatever. And people really loved it, and I got really good feedback on that. I was like, wow, people, it's not just me, like people really love this subject as like a research field. At the time when I was doing the presentation, I made a point of not mentioning blockchain. It was like a purely, what if you had a distributed system, you wanted these properties and whatever. And I feel like people are much more receptive if you just don't mention blockchain. You mention it as a mathematical problem you're trying to solve. And then there's a Haskell meetup in Seattle that I went to every now and then. I said, hey, I should do a presentation on the wallet specification at the Haskell meetup. So I went through the wallet specification, how it is, how it's programmed in Haskell, and how that kind of all works together. So I was, doing all this stuff as if it was like part of my job already, and people really loved it. And so, that's also one of the reasons why I thought this is a great opportunity to make it my job by joining Emergo.
Well, that must have made for a really nice transition. And plus you could take, the things that you learned from Microsoft, you maybe consciously or subconsciously, you could like roll right into, roll that into what you do to Emergo. All right, Philippe.
Yes. So what's the last question, Rick? That was a great answer, Sebastian. I think that's really cool. And I mean, if people are not understanding exactly how big that transition is that Sebastian did, that's huge. I mean, like Rick was saying, Microsoft, you're working for Microsoft, or you're working for Google, or you're working for Facebook, any of these large Fortune 500 companies that run the world, and you kind of leave that to go to an emerging technology. Just shows you how much conviction you have to have within that emerging technology. And I echo whatever Sebastian felt to move forward. I mean, that's very reassuring, I think. I mean, I think that's a great story. I think you agree with me, Rick.
Yes, sir. I absolutely do agree with you. Okay, so I'm just going to roll this into the podcast. So right now I show 7:59 p.m. on my computer. So it's been about 50 minutes. We're looking at least another 10 minutes left. Yeah. We're going to go with a natural kind of flow on this podcast. So if it rolls over an hour, if it rolls up to an hour and a half, that's perfectly fine. I'm going to use the Joe Rogan rule, and the Joe Rogan rule is like an hour to an hour and a half. Now, what I'm not going to do like Joe Rogan is like bust open a bottle of Kabiki and hit a blunt. Okay, that ain't going to happen on this podcast. I've got my water or my coffee, and that's what I'm going to use. So we're looking at like we got at least 20 minutes left. And our last roundtable question here that we have is, when Lambo? Just kidding. Not win Lambo. We don't want to do it in that context. It's the question, what does mass adoption mean? You guys have probably heard Charles bring this question up. Many people bring it up. I've seen this on other podcasts and other YouTube channels that are dedicated to mass adoption or discussing mass adoption. And there's some really good podcasts out there. And I highly recommend that you review those. But we're also going to touch on subjects like that during this podcast. So what we'll do is we'll roll over to Philippe and try to get, what does this mass adoption thing mean? You know, how does that fit for you?
Rick, that's a great question. So I think that's like the billion, or if you want to consider it, $1 trillion question for cryptocurrency, when mass adoption. And people have been touting that mass adoption is coming soon. It's, it might be next month, it might be next week, or it might be in 2020 when the next halving happens. But there's a lot of conflicting answers as to what mass adoption is. And, people are under the assumption that everyone's going to drop everything and run to crypto. And I think that's highly improbable. I was talking to Rick a while ago, and I was saying that, people are still having trouble inserting their cards into the slots at like Walmart, like they still put it the opposite way. And then they're supposed to move to crypto. They can barely figure out their credit cards. So we've got to take baby steps in order to get to that quote unquote mass adoption. And like I said before, two systems can run in parallel and still exist. I don't think fiat is dying anytime soon, but there needs to be alternatives to the current system. This is what I brought props for, this question. And I'm Haitian American, first generation born in the United States. And both my parents' sides, they live in Haiti. And right here, this is the Haitian goud, which is the currency for Haiti. And as you can see, there's a 25, a 10, a 10, and various fives. So printed on freshly off the press. And the reason why I bring this today is because, one of the things that drew me to crypto was this idea of an alternate system. And Haiti is a very poor country. If you're not familiar with Haiti, it is a small little country in the Caribbean, and it's very poor. The average salary, minimum wage in Haiti, it used to be like $2 a day, US dollars. I think it's up to like $5.11. But the goud has lost around 44% of its value in the past 5 years. So while inflation in this country happens at like around 2% per year, third world countries and developing countries feel the effect 10 times worse. So what I'm trying to get around is like this whole idea that the rest of the world are going through some serious issues. The United States pretty much controls the monetary system for the world. So if they're experiencing a little bit of inflation, other countries are experiencing a lot of inflation. And the mass adoption thing, it's important because I think that value needs to be returned to people that actually produce goods and services for the rest of the world. While, they may not be working directly for you, they're picking the goods, and they're picking the raw materials that allow people in Western nations or more affluent nations to enjoy the lifestyle that they have. And one of the things that Charles mentions is this idea of getting the unbanked population within this ecosystem. So I think that that's when we can start considering mass adoption, the steps towards mass adoption happening. Moving people that are working, the people that are working from the ground up, that are living on less than $2 a day, or in the case that I just said, making minimum wage, let's say $5 US dollars a day, and are picking the raw materials that are going to get shipped to China or are going to get shipped to somewhere else for manufacturing of certain goods. They need to retain more value, and they need to make sure that they can grow their little nest egg, even if it's not a lot, but being able to have a bank account, having a crypto account, and have your money digitally available for you, and able to pass a little bit of money from generation to generation to generation to bring you out of that never-ending cycle of poverty. And I think that's where mass adoption starts. It's not like the United States and Americans and Europeans and Japanese and Chinese people that are affluent. I'm not saying that everyone within these countries is affluent, but I'm saying that the people that are affluent within these nations, it's not about them moving all their assets to crypto, but it's about moving the small little guy and little girl onto the crypto platform and allowing them to grow as people, allowing their families to grow, allowing them to flourish. I think that's when we can consider mass adoption. But this whole idea of everyone dropping everything and running, it's just not going to happen. Not going to happen. The system itself right now, it doesn't work too well, but it works better than what crypto does right now. And eventually that things may switch, but for now, we need to focus on the people that are the most oppressed and then work our way up. And that's, I think, how we can quantify or the term mass adoption.
Hey, great points there, Philippe. And you know what? There's mass adoption is such a complex matter that there's so many different angles you can take to what you consider mass adoption. Like, I just learned something from Philippe. I didn't even look at it from the perspective, although I've heard other videos of talking about, a lot of times we've got people from IHK traveling to like Ethiopia and other places, and they're trying to introduce it to people who need a financial system, a stable financial system. So that's one thing that would drive mass adoption. But I look at it from very many different perspectives. One of them is, how do I buy a taco with it? Okay, so to me that's like the benchmark question. When I can go to Taco Bell and buy a taco with ADA, mass adoption has been achieved, at least from my narrow-minded perspective as an American. Not that Americans are narrow-minded, but from a narrow perspective, if I could do that, to me, that's what a mass adoption would look like. I could buy a taco with it. That might be a common question that comes up is, hey, look at this really cool technology and all these great things we can do. And I love that kind of stuff. And then it boils down to, how do I buy a hamburger or something? So mass adoption, how do we get there? That then becomes a question. How do we get to the point of mass adoption? In my opinion, it's each one of us, those of us that understand crypto, going out and finding just one other person and explain to them how does crypto work? What is it? Why is there a benefit? Those are the kind of things that we can do to each person can do with mass adoption. I'm not a developer. The only thing I do with software is I break it by accident, usually is what happens. But developers are not going to create the mass adoption. Developers are going to create the technology. So we can't keep putting the responsibility on the developers and say, hey, when mass adoption? I'm just going to collect crypto and sit back and say, wait for the money to show up. I can't do that. We all have to take a little bit of part and get involved. There's something each of us could do. Of course, you don't want to be that annoying guy in the office that sometimes gets referred to as Dan and, always touting what cryptocurrencies are. But if you take the time to explain to one other person how cryptocurrency works, they'll have a better understanding. Like Philippe had mentioned earlier, and it was a real funny story too, was people putting their credit card in the machine wrong. That's me. I still do that. We have chips. The US is like halfway between slide and chip. And now the US is halfway between, once you stick your chip in, is it the green button or is it the red button? So now that I'm using my chip, now I got to figure out, should I push the green button or the red button to get my transaction to complete? And so even mass adoption, credit is considered mass adopted. It still has its issues every time they change something. So crypto is still way in its infancy. And everybody who knows crypto now, if you can just spell crypto, and I like the word digital, like digital currency, because crypto carries this really nefarious kind of sound to it. But anyway, that's just my preference. But if you can at least spell crypto, you could probably explain to somebody else how to use it or what it does. and eventually it'll catch on. If it's a good thing, it'll catch on because there's so many applications for it. And mass adoption applies to so many different areas. You got the stocks and bonds sector, you got the buying tacos and hamburgers sector, and you have, like Philippe mentioned, you have the sector of countries that are in need of a better financial system. And so the mass adoption includes all these different aspects. So anybody can implement mass adoption. And speaking of developers and how developers can do that kind of stuff, Sebastian, what are your thoughts? What do you think? What is mass adoption? What does that mean when Lambo?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like mass adoption kind of has two components to it, right? One of them is the actual usage of the currency, right? Can you really go buy a taco or this kind of stuff? And to a certain extent, there already exists an alternative economy based on cryptocurrencies, right? You can go around and use Bitcoins or ADA for a few various purposes. It's not used everywhere. It cannot be used everywhere, but there is some, subset of the economy that can be sustained by this model. In fact, a few people, spend their lives trying to live, unbanked, right? They try and move 100% of cryptocurrency and they kind of tweet about it or whatever. So there's that component to mass adoption. I think there's also the component of actual participation in the system, right? So if you do a survey right now in most developed nations, do you know what Bitcoin is, cryptocurrency or whatever? A huge percentage of people say yes. If you ask people, have you ever owned any cryptocurrencies? A non-trivial percentage people will say yes, usually like in the single digits, 5-6%, something like that. And so you could say we've already achieved a certain amount of mass adoption of knowledge of the subject, right? Obviously, people don't have a deep understanding, but they have a understanding of this concept and kind of what it is and the fact that it exists, right? And I think to a certain extent, if we want to further this, then what we have to solve is kind of the participation asymmetry is what I like to think of it as, which is right now, if you look at cryptocurrencies, there's two kinds of people, right? There's the people, developing the protocol, which are highly involved in the project and all these technical decisions. And then there's everybody else, which is just the investors. They put money into it. And then that's the extent of their participation in the system, right? And they just hope something happens, right? And how do we drive mass adoption, not just in, the 5 or 6% that buy the coin, but the 5 to 6% that could join the project and get involved. And I think what that really boils down to is how do we get people to participate in stuff like governance and stuff like block creation and staking and this kind of stuff. And I think that's one of the reasons why I think, projects like Cardano can really help drive community participation. Because, if you get involved in the Cardano ecosystem as the project develops, then you'll be able to, build your dApp on the protocol. You'll be able to, deploy your smart contract. You'll be able to contribute to the core protocol if you want. But you can also just, participate in the staking pools and try and decide which staking pools you should join and which one is using the money it gains in the most moral way possible. And, maybe if you run a staking pool, you can, try and donate your proceeds to charity and get involved running something like that, or you can get involved in the governance project and decide which projects get funded and this kind of stuff. And I think this is a different kind of mass adoption, because even if the percentage of people that use, ADA to transact does not increase, the involvement in the protocol, if we get 5 or 6% of the population involved in not just buying ADA, but involved in the governance process of ADA and, deciding what the future of our protocol looks like, I mean, that's huge to me, and that's mass adoption to me.
So what you're saying, if I'm looking on Binance or Bittrex and I see this huge spike, a big giant green candle, and all this massive volume, that doesn't mean mass adoption, does it? Not really, huh?
No, the markets are always gamed. I mean, this has been a known fact in cryptocurrencies since the beginning, right? You look at the markets, and it's like, there's some people with a lot of these tokens out there and a lot of time on their hand to play around with that money, and they control what happens. And I don't think the price going up or down necessarily revolves mass adoption. Often it represents that somebody with a lot of money or a lot of tokens is making some big play to try and increase their stack.
Yeah, And Philippe, what do you think? What is the magic benchmark that we might see that might say, yay, mass adoption has occurred? Is it a big giant green candle on Bittrex, or is there some other way of identifying what does mass adoption mean?
That's a good question. I've never really thought about that pivotal or that inflection point where we can say, when does mass adoption occur? I mean, I would have to echo both what you and Sebastian said about how, especially what Sebastian was saying about utility and people that are actually spending and involved in the governance within these crypto systems. If we can bump that percentage up, then I think we can consider ourselves mass adopted or go towards that mass adoption. But like this whole idea of, like, I don't even think that it's going to be at an e-commerce level. You know, like right now you can, of course, go and buy some socks with Bitcoin or ADA or whatever you want to buy with Bitcoin. There's probably a website out there to purchase it. But, you know, I don't think that e-commerce is going to be the metric for mass adoption. I think it's going to be just maybe like a whole shift in thought, or a whole shift in collective thought of everyone that lives within like the traditional fiat society and how they view crypto. Because we were just mentioning price, and people still value their crypto in US dollars or euros or yen, whatever local currency that they have. So we obviously haven't moved to that point where it's the switch has been made. It's not like, how many ADA do you have? It's like, how many ADA do you have, and what is that USD valuation? Or how much Bitcoin do you have, and what's the price of Bitcoin right now? Let me put it in my calculator. Most people are still dead set on cashing out of the system. So I wouldn't consider that mass adoption whatsoever, because, what I see in Cardano is I want to live within the system. I want to hold my ADA, and when that thought process changes, I want to value my worth in ADA, not so much like, when am I going to cash out to buy this or buy that or put it back in my bank account, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense, because, if I go to Taco Bell and I buy ADA, what would it cost me today? I'm going to buy one taco for, I don't know, $1.50. So that's what, 20 ADA. So if I buy for 20 ADA this week, and in February, 20 ADA is worth $2, I'm going to say, wow, why did I do that? That did make sense. So I think you're right, Philippe. I don't know, mass adoption might not be characterized by e-commerce. That might not, and how many websites will accept ADA for their product, or how many websites will accept Bitcoin for their product. I did recently hear that Starbucks is going to do, an experimental program again. I think they've done some kind of experiment before with Bitcoin, but instead of taking Bitcoin, this is what I've heard. Instead of taking Bitcoin at face value, the quantity would be, you take the amount of Bitcoin that currently translate to the US dollar, and then as it scales up or down, you would take the quantity of Bitcoin based on that new value, like a daily average or something like that. Because, we've all heard the story of the guy I call like the original Bitcoin guy. He bought 2 pizzas for, what was it? Was it like 10,000 Bitcoin or something like that?
Yeah, it was 10,000, I think. Yes.
Okay, so this guy buys 2 pizzas for 10,000 Bitcoin, and I'm grateful for that guy. I'm glad he did that. That is the person who started the ball rolling on mass adoption right there, as far as I'm concerned. Because if he didn't buy those 2 pizzas for 10,000 Bitcoin, my one little Casacious coin here I wouldn't even be able to buy a slice of pepperoni with it. So his sacrifice led to all of our benefit, and eventually it will.
Yeah, that's one way to look at it.
That's how I look at it. I say that guy made the sacrifice so that we could all play along. Satoshi did some great work in math, but that guy that got hungry one night and bought 2 pizzas with 10,000 Bitcoin, you're the real MVP.
I heard he's doing pretty well. I think he had quite a lot of Bitcoin. So I read a follow-up article that he's living pretty large. So I don't think he took that much of a hit, but that is still a pretty big hit.
That is, at the time, it wasn't like, I don't know, Bitcoin was like less than a penny or something like that in value. I mean, it all starts from nothing. And the only way it gains value is that people trade it. And they trade it and they spend it and they trade it and they spend it. And then it starts gaining value and gaining momentum. Right now, everybody's a hodl. Well, you kind of got two categories of people that I've come across on the Telegram forums, because that's where I see most people. And what most people are doing is either they're a day trader where they're swapping between currencies to try to get a little more out of it, or they're just stockpiling and putting it away, but they're not exchanging it for either physical objects or something like that. And someday, I hope to see software developers out there. If you need ideas, just let me know and I'll just keep throwing them out there. You probably already have them all anyway. But, like coupons, I go to the store just a week and a half ago, and my wife pulls out her purse. And, women's purses are these magical things that have enormous amounts of objects in them. And she goes, I forgot my coupons. And I thought, wow, if coupons were on a blockchain and you had it stored inside your phone and you could just go click, 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 bing. Okay, there's my coupons. It'd be like, wow, that'd be great. So, these ICO tokens, they're all trying to be, not all of them, but they're trying to make a lot of what they call stable currency. I think it'd be great if you could put coupons on there. That's what I consider part of mass adoption. I think it would be fantastic if you could put movie tickets on a blockchain. And if I wanted, right now I'm sitting here on one side of the United States, and Philippe is in another part of the United States, and Sebastian is in Japan. And if I wanted to give him a movie ticket, I could go click, 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 bing, and I just gave him a movie ticket for Christmas or something like that. So that's the kind of things that when we can do that and buy the taco, then I think we're getting closer to what we call mass adoption, at least on the e-commerce side of the house.
Yeah, one thing I like to say is that I think for people in first world countries, I think the concept of mass adoption is kind of just a marketing ploy. So I mean, if you think about why is there such hype around cryptocurrencies, and part of it is because it's a neat technology, but part of it is because there's some people with large bags. I mean, they're trying to increase the price of their coins by any means necessary, right? And so there's this concept of mass adoption. At some point, they're gonna switch, and then suddenly we're gonna go into crypto wonderland or whatever. And it kind of misleads people. I think in a lot of cases, when people look at a new project or a new piece of research, they're trying to understand, how is this revolutionary? How does this change the entire world? But in reality, for people in the first world nation where we're already banked, we already have a bunch of fairly good services, a lot of stuff cryptography can provide is incremental changes and incremental improvements. They're not maybe such a big deal individually, but over time pile up. And so this is something I've realized is a huge problem when trying to explain a project to somebody just in general. You explain crypto, you're explaining this way of using blockchain or whatever, and they're like, but I don't understand. Where's the revolution? How is this going to change everything? It feels like there's still a bunch of problems to this. I'm like, yeah, it's not a revolution. There's this one tiny problem that solves, maybe improves a little bit, and there's some trade-offs to it. You have to pay for it more in this other way. And you can argue it's maybe an incremental improvement. And people have a harder time understanding these nuanced discussions. And so obviously, if you're in a third world country and you're going from unbanked to banked, or not banked, but to being able to use cryptocurrencies to manage your finances, obviously that's a big change. But in the first world countries, this is a more nuanced potential improvement, right? This is why we say it's like an alternative system. The system may not be perfect now, but for most people in the first world countries, 99% of people, it's working good enough, right? And so a cryptocurrency may provide an alternative system with maybe some incremental improvements in certain areas, but it's not revolutionary, in my opinion.
Yeah, you bring up a good point, because people have a different perspective from a third world country and what they see as something is adopted, and in a first world country is adopted, where, to me, it's like, can I buy the taco? But in a third world, it's like, can I store my value in some way that it won't be stolen from me? That's what we use banks for. It's an armored warehouse for your life savings. And another perspective about the third world countries is recently in Venezuela, Venezuela had that super inflationary problem where Philippe was saying that a tiny bit of inflation in the United States equals a massive amount of inflation in another country. And in Venezuela, the inflation got so far out of control, their money became more valuable to burn it to cook your food than it did to use it to buy something with. And so people were sending Nano. Again, I don't mean to keep reaching back to Nano, but this channel will reach out to other communities. And I've got to give props to Nano, at least from what I've read on the Reddits and on the news reports, is that people were sending it to Venezuela. And I can't remember the exact numbers. I don't want to quote myself on it, but they would send a certain amount of Nano there, and it had a lot of value to it, to where they could buy things like bottled water and supplies that they needed because their money was in such turmoil. So their community was donating. They're like, okay, if I buy a little bit of Nano here, and that's the really cool thing about cryptocurrencies is you can purchase it online and then load it on your electronic device of some sort and then send it at infinite distance. And it gets to the other end reliably. Now they can use it. And so I thought that was really cool. And so I think that was just one more stepping stone. And as long as we see success stories like that coming and they continue to occur, then we're going to be in a lot better shape. Crypto will find that niche, that problem it can solve. As Sebastian said, is the cryptocurrency, it needs to solve a problem. Kind of, I don't want to quote you, Sebastian, but you solve a little problem here, it fits and it works, and then you keep moving forward, little small layers at a time, baby steps. So my opinion in general is mass adoption will occur. It'll be gradual. Someday it'll be here and we'll never even notice that it happened. And I think cryptocurrencies will kind of exist side by side with fiat. And there will be a relatively transparent relationship. And mass adoption will occur when we stop asking the question when mass adoption will occur, because we won't even realize that it occurred. So that's all I have on that subject. Guys, what do you think?
I think that this was good. I agree with both of your comments, your closing statements, and I think that we hit our first 4 questions for our podcast today, and I think that we did a good job. We can carry over this topic to our next podcast, and we're going to always be keeping the content fresh and innovative and try to keep it as fun as possible. I want to thank Rick and Sebastian for being wonderful hosts, and I look forward to continuing this podcast. This is our first one, so you need to leave comments. You need to critique us. You need to send some questions to the cardanoeffect@gmail.com. I'll include all the links below. I'm also going to be including the links to Rick's channel and Sebastian's channel, YouTube channel, as well as my channel. And you can check out some more Cardano-related content. We had a blast preparing this for you, and we have many more to come. So if anyone wanted to add anything else, I think that this was a great first episode.
Hey, thank you, Philippe. Thank you, Sebastian. That's all I got. Y'all have a great day.